Longtime Sonic fans might remember the disaster that was the Sonic crossover with Image Comics that happened in Archie Sonic, where Sonic met the titular Hellspawn Spawn. Not gonna lie, I assumed after that story we wouldn't really see anything as crazy as that, and for a time I was right. However, 32 years later, Sonic has had a crossover with none other than DC Comics, and I'm not gonna lie, I had my reservations, but the story is actually pretty solid. Our story would start in Sonic's world, where a giant dark side head would appear in the sky. Following the arrival of this big giant head, parademons would then appear, and they would prompt Sonic and his friends to take on these interdimensional beings. Sonic, Amy, and Tails would head out to go check on their friends after dealing with the parademons, and along their way in Sunset City, Sonic would meet none other than the Flash, who seems equally confused as to how he got here. Now, the Flash would end up telling Sonic initially to hold back. However, he would quickly realize that Sonic is not only able to hold his own, but he can go toe-to-toe with the Flash when it comes to speed. In fact, it kind of looks like he might be faster than the Flash. In the same area, Silver would also end up meeting up with the Green Lantern, more specifically the John Smith Green Lantern, and the two would make a really fun pairing. Of course, Shadow the Edgy Hedgy would meet with Batman the Edgy Humie, and Tails and Amy would meet up with both Wonder Woman, who was working with Cyborg. Now, during all of this, on Angel Island, things would not be going so smoothly for Knuckles, as the giant Darkseid Noggin made its way there, and unfortunately, while competent against the parademons, Knuckles would be no match for a giant laser, which caused Angel Island to plummet into the water. With Knuckles fleeing Angel Island, he would come across Calibac and just beat him down. I really love the panel where he comes up from behind and just attacks him. It's a lot of fun. Now, as it would turn out, since the floating island became the sunken island, Knuckles had been working with Superman. Once everyone was together, the gang would have a moment to introduce themselves and get everyone caught up to speed. In essence, the big giant head is called Ragnarok, and Darkseid is using it to travel between dimensions to look for sources of power. Even Sonic is kind of frustrated that yet again somebody is after the Chaos Emeralds, but yes, that is why he is here, obviously. Everyone would decide to team up to go and stop Darkseid, and we'd be off. Or we would be, if not for Shadow. We would actually get a bit of a pause here where we'd get a fun moment between Shadow and Batman. So essentially Shadow leaves and Batman would go after him. Batman would immediately ask Shadow who it was that he lost, as he can see the pain and anger inside of Shadow that reflects his own. He then explains that after losing his parents, he swore that he would never let something like that happen again, and Shadow would share his story about Maria. Then, through some trauma bonding, Batman would convince him to come along. With that, everybody would pair up with their DC partner, and we'd have some pretty fun dialogue. I really love Knuckles' confusion at the fact that the remainder of Superman's planet is poison to him, but we also get to learn about Wonder Woman's invisible jet, which is a great little fun reference. But honestly, my favorite is Sonic explaining to the Flash that what you see is what you get. I'm just a hedgehog who loves adventure, and I'm always here for those SA2 references. It's so fun. Honestly, it's just goofy, fun, shut off your brain dialogue, and I love it. The group would go hunt down Darkseid, but uh-oh, he's already got his hands on a Chaos Emerald. Sonic and Flash would try to get this Chaos Emerald from Darkseid, but his Windows 98 pipe screensaver would chase after them and keep them at bay. Darkseid would escape, and we'd get a fun little quip where Flash would call in what happened and explain that Sonic was just too slow, which is always kind of fun. I like that they kind of go butting heads with each other regarding their speeds. Sonic's friends, along with their DC buddies, would then head out and search for Darkseid, and I'll be honest, with the exception of Steppenwolf, I don't really know who any of these people that they're fighting are. And honestly, they don't really have enough of an impression for me to really talk about them, as most of them are really just here for a handful of panels at the max. Truth be told, I actually don't know a ton about Darkseid to begin with. I have read a good chunk of DC Comics, however the majority of it has been Batman one-off stories and some Constantine and a little bit of Superman, but not that much. So really my knowledge of Darkseid is limited to the fact that one of his top leaders is an old lady named Granny Goodness, and the other is just some guy named Glorious Godfrey, neither of which show up right now. Meanwhile, Darkseid is talking with Desaad, a name that sounds like a toddler trying to say Darkseid. And the very chaotic nature of the Chaos Emerald has made it hard for him to find more of them. However, just the power of one emerald is enough to cause some real havoc. So back on the ground, Steppenwolf, another top dog of the Darkseid troops, would have found the red Chaos Emerald. However, he would get a lesson in the power of Chaos Emeralds, as Shadow would use Chaos Control and just lay the boots to Steppenwolf. Now, before he could remind us that he is the ultimate life form, something would start to happen, and Sonic's world would start to crumble as time seemed to be running out to stop Darkseid. Fortunately, it's here that Sonic would speak with Eggman, and can I just say, I love the way he's drawn here. He's got some really fun poses in just about every scene we see him in. It's so much fun. It's also kind of funny that Eggman criticizes Darkseid's ship for having his face on it, considering that, like, pretty much everything Eggman makes has his face plastered on it. You know what doesn't have his face on it, though? That's the egg carrier, and man, I love seeing this thing come back. It's just a fun ship. Eggman would ram the egg carrier directly into Ragnarok's eyes, and that would allow Sonic and his friends a way in. I do think that their fight against Darkseid once inside is a lot of fun with some really great panels. I do really enjoy Shadow just berating Darkseid and going on about how he's not actually all that tough, though ultimately Darkseid would prove to be nearly unstoppable against all of them. However, the one thing that Darkseid just can't seem to control and bend to his will is the Chaos Emerald as he tries to fight it and force it into his control. As he does this, reality around him starts to fall apart, and in the nick of time, the Justice League would manage to hold him down and they would send Sonic and friends through a boom tube to another world. This would be the DC universe that Sonic and his friends would find themselves trapped in. They would learn from Mr. Terrific that their world, the Justice League, and even Darkseid, was possibly destroyed by an overload of power. Not only that, but there's no way to find their home as there are no coordinates to go and even check. So for the time being, Sonic and his friends are trapped here. I'm not gonna lie, I kinda love the direction the story went in. Basically from here, Mr. Terrific informs them that with the good guys displaced, these critters are gonna have to take their heroes' positions, as it won't be long before the villains notice that they are gone. And so Sonic and friends just go on and wear superheroes' costumes that, conveniently, they just happen to have some laying around that fit Sonic and friends. It's honestly kinda corny, but I love it. I think honestly the part I dislike the most about these costumes is probably Silver. He looks fine, but the green mask he's got on just doesn't quite look right. It looks like some green eyeliner. But everyone else, honestly, really fun designs. Basically what goes on from here is that each member heads out to go and save the day. Silver fights against Sinestro with the help of two of my favorite Green Lantern Corps members, which are Kilowog and Chip. And after beating Sinestro, they get a Chaos Emerald. Also really funny that Silver can't understand a word that Chip is saying. It's just fun. Amy goes on to help Hawkgirl and Supergirl take out Gorilla Grodd, and surprise, surprise, leads to yet another Chaos Emerald. Amy is just super fun here. She's so kind and just really supportive to the two other heroines. I really enjoy it. She also gets a flying car, which is really funny, and I really like that. However, by far the best of all the interactions has got to be between Knuckles and Lex Luthor. So Knuckles would go and take on Superman's mantle, and he would get called to Luthor's tower. Once smashing into there, Luthor would then threaten him with what he believed to be kryptonite. However, as it turns out, it's just the green Chaos Emerald. So Knuckles would just take it for him, assuming that this was just like a gift from Luthor, and not realizing that Luthor was trying to poison him. It's really funny. He pops back in and asks if he was trying to poison him. I enjoy it. It's goofy, it's silly. Like I said, you just gotta kind of shut off your brain while you're reading it. Honorable mention would also go out to Shadow. I think he's got a really great costume, and overall, his face-off against the Joker, who would call him an edgy hedgy, is pretty fun. Joker even goes on in monologues about how Shadow isn't doing things the same way as Batman, and Shadow would just beat up Joker and take the Chaos Emerald from him. Probably the worst off, if I'm being totally honest, is Sonic. Maybe it's just a me thing, but I've never been a super big fan of the Flash and his reskin enemies. So Sonic goes up against Yellow Flash. It's probably Thrawn, but I don't know, I just find it kind of boring. After this, the group meets up at the Hall of Justice where, gasp, it's Ken Penders' Green Knuckles! He came through the multiverse! No, in fact, it's Beast Boy who turned into Knuckles. And I kind of love the idea that he can just turn into any of the critters from Sonic's world. That's super fun, and I kind of wish we got to see more of it utilized in this comic. I don't know how they would use it, but I think it would be kind of fun to see. Also, just a quick little aside, but you may have noticed that Knuckles has toes right here, and really long-term fans of this channel will know that 3 years ago I made a video about the feet in Sonic the Hedgehog, and as it turns out, they have disgusting bean-shaped feet, and not feet with toes, so this is something that the comic got wrong. Anyways, I'm gonna be honest, things aren't super well explained from here. Tails is disguised as Cyborg, and unfortunately we don't really get to see him do any fighting, but he does let out a booyah, which is a fun little reference to Teen Titans, of course. And with the 5 Chaos Emeralds that they collected, maybe 6, I don't totally know if Tails got a Chaos Emerald or not. I don't think he did because we never saw him get one. But anyways, with these definitely 5, they're able to lock onto the 7th and maybe 6th one, which are in another world, and that means the Darkseid, the Justice League, and their world survived whatever had happened after the Chaos Emeralds started going crazy. So with the coordinates, the group is now off to go and try and save the Justice League. Now, basically, during this whole time, in Sonic's world, the Flash would manage to get the red Chaos Emerald, and Cyborg would use it to get them out of Ragnarok as the Chaos Energy started to make everything all wibbly-wobbly. With that, Cyborg had a plan, but to put it in action, he needed the other Chaos Emeralds. So the gang are off to go and search for them, and it's kinda similar to what we just saw earlier. Unfortunately, we don't get to see like a ton of Sonic villains show up here. A lot of them are still DC villains, and it's a little disappointing if I'm honest with you. I would have liked to see more Sonic references showing up with DC interacting with Sonic characters, but for the most part, they're just kind of fighting DC characters yet again. So we'd get to see Wonder Woman help Blaze take out Stompa and Mad Harriet, characters that I don't really know, but I really like that Blaze uses fire from her feet to fly. I think that's a lot of fun. Together, they beat them, and Blaze gives her a Chaos Emerald. Batman would end up chasing down Metal Sonic. This is a really fun scene. I like that they're on an iconic shadow stage while they're doing this. It's a good little parallel. However, these are 2 characters that rarely ever speak, so there's like no dialogue that happens here. Batman ends up beating him, and he gets an emerald from him. Flash fights the Deadly Six, as well as Baron Vermin. All characters that honestly I don't care much for or know a ton about. And there's another emerald though for Flash. Superman would go up against Eggman, and this is a lot of fun. This is some good engagement against characters. Eggman is, once again, just so animated in all of his panels. I just adore him. Even with a giant mech though, he's no match for Superman. I love that he ends up chastising Superman for not even letting him do any pre-battle banter. And so Superman ends up getting a Chaos Emerald from him. And in a really cool scene, the Green Lantern sort of combines himself with the power of all of the wisps inside of his ring, and he takes out Granny Goodness with a rainbow barrage of attacks from his ring. It looks super cool. It's a lot of fun seeing him use all of the colors like that. And in the end, with 6 emeralds, they managed to create some kind of multi-dimensional portal thing, letting Sonic and his friends in. I'm gonna be honest with you, maybe there's something I didn't understand. I tried reading this a few times, and again, maybe it's just like I'm overworked and I'm not thinking straight here, but I'm kind of confused. There's definitely more than 7 emeralds going on here, so I don't know if like things have been fractured between universes or what's going on, to be totally honest with you. Probably the weakest point of the story. I find that they don't explain things super well, but whatever. With that, Sonic and friends would manage to teleport back into their original world, and once there, the goal here, unsurprisingly, is to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds in hand, which means going to Ragnarok, and we'd get a really fun panel of all of them running together. It's super fun. I really like how in this panel, everybody's running side by side except for Amy, and when I originally looked at it, I was wondering why they did that, and then I realized that Amy is hanging on to Wonder Woman's lasso as she cannot fly with her. I'll be honest with you, the next part's a lot of fun, but there's nothing all that insane or crazy or notable that happens aside from like really cool looking fight panels as they fight against Darkseid in this distorted world. Probably one of the best parts is that Flash ends up being flipped upside down, and so he and Sonic have to run on each other's feet in synchronous to get Sonic to a Chaos Emerald. That's a lot of fun. Once number 7 is in hand, Sonic ends up going super, and it's great to see him go against Darkseid, as Darkseid's actually able to hold his own quite a bit against Super Sonic and headbutts him. Everyone needs to help out here, which always fun when it's not just Sonic doing all of the work, and so everybody goes up against Darkseid. Ultimately, this leads to them still running out of time and things are falling apart yet again. And so the Flash here would destroy what I assume to be some kind of vital tether, which ends up sending everybody back to their worlds. Gonna be honest with you, the last 2 issues are probably the weakest out of these 5. They're all really, really fun to read. However, things aren't super well explained. Like I said, if you're reading this as a sort of like shut off your brain and just have fun comics, see some really fun panels, it's great. It does that job quite well. However, I think they could have improved the story quite a bit. We do get a really fun thing once everybody is back and sort of getting settled back into their own worlds, as we learn that Eggman has somehow found himself into the DC world. and that he has made a deal with Lex Luthor. And we have a Luthor Tech slash Eggman Tech bot scene in the background. It's a lot of fun. I would be open to seeing some kind of sequel with this in mind. However, I do think the writing leaves a little bit to be desired throughout this comic. And I'm not looking for much out of a Sonic comic, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like the last two comics sort of hand waved away a lot of things. And I get it, they're working with a limited amount of issues and stuff, but still, overall though, really, really fun comic book. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Leave it a subscribe, a like, or a comment. They all go a really, really long way. I also am really curious as to what people thought about this comic book. In general, people online seem to have enjoyed it, but if I'm totally honest, I've tried to avoid a lot of discourse online about it just because I didn't want to get it spoiled. And so I'm going into it kind of blind. I enjoyed it, and I'm curious if you guys enjoyed it too, or also kind of curious if there's something that I missed, or if maybe you guys feel similarly about the writing in this comic book. Anyways, let me know or don't. I'm not your boss. At the end of the day, I can't tell you what to do. I just hope that you have a good one.